Welcome to the Microsoft IT Pro Podcast, a show about Office 365, Azure, and the IT Pro and end user side of life. Each week, we'll discuss a different topic or recent news related to Office 365 and Azure and how it relates to you as an IT Pro. The MS IT Pro Podcast is never longer than 30 minutes, so let's get started.
Good morning, Ben.
Good morning, Scott. How are you today?
I'm doing all right. I'm getting ready to move out of my house for a week for my post-hurricane repair stuff.
Oh, that's no fun.
Yeah, it's going to be a nice, fun, hectic day because there's nothing like getting ready to move out, like literally moving furniture out so they can do ceilings and walls and things like that, all to just move back in a week later. Should be a blast.
Yeah, let me know how that goes.
I will. When I'm sitting in your driveway using your Wi-Fi, you'll know why.
All right. Hey, it reaches out to the cul-de-sac. You can just camp out there.
Done. Got it. I'll bring my paddleboard. Just go hang out in the little pond.
Sounds good. That makes my audio issues seem minor this morning.
Right?
It only took me 15 minutes to get this recording actually working.
One of these days, we'll get this down.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we digress once again. We should go ahead and get into it. So we're going to talk about news, right?
Yeah. It's amazing how quick I feel like these come up and how much stuff we have every time these news episodes come around.
Gobs and pages and pages. And really, this is like, hey, let's go through the message center, or realistically, let's send Ben through the message center. Let's go through a couple blogs and pull some things out. But the cadence continues to be, man, like you said, it just keeps rocking and rolling. You know, in that vein, let's talk a little bit about the roadmap for Skype for Business and its transition over to Teams.
Yeah, so this was kind of a follow-up to the announcements that came out at Ignite, kind of around Teams essentially replacing Skype for Business here in the future. So they didn't actually give us a roadmap at the time of Ignite, but now that Ignite is come and gone, they actually gave us a roadmap that kind of outlines what they're thinking. Again, these dates are by no means set in stone, but they're trying to give us an idea of when it's coming. So there's a bunch of stuff coming in, hopefully Q4 of this year, around some of the audio conferencing, some anonymous join into meetings.
That'll be nice, right?
Yeah.
Invite your external participants and they can actually get in.
Exactly. Support for Edge. Imagine that. Microsoft's going to support their own browser in the fourth quarter of this year.
Yeah. Well, you got to give them time.
Yeah, Chrome was in there too. So Chrome was in there, some call quality analytics, a bunch of stuff around calling. So in Q4 of this year, they're hoping to do a bunch of the call forwarding, dialing, voicemail. So a lot of that PSTN type stuff looks like it's hopefully coming to the Teams client later this year. I know that's one they've showed several demos of, is that calling within Teams. And then coming more next year is going to be what I would say more of the advanced calling meeting stuff, like PowerPoint load and share, whiteboards, Skype room system support, Surface Hub support, federated meetings, cloud recording, all of the call queues, auto attendance, forward to a group, support for phones, for the SIP phones. So that's all kind of Q2 of 2018. And then Q4 of next year is going to be some of the call park, group call pickup. So there's a bunch of stuff in here. We'll put a link to this PDF out in the show notes so you can go look at it. The one thing that's interesting that I don't see on here anywhere, just flipping through it, is kind of that replacement for Cloud Connector that I'm assuming is going to have to be coming here at some point in time. Oh, here it is, hybrid connection. So that's supposed to be Q2. Again, these are very rough timelines, so don't hold them to it. But everything should be there by the end of next year.
Yeah, no, it's interesting to look at this. So there's always that balance when you think about Skype as a chat platform and then Skype as a calling or kind of a UCaaS platform, right? And being a little more holistic. So it looks like based on their current roadmap, really by the end of Q2 for the calendar year next year, not Microsoft's fiscal year, but their calendar year, you should have everything across chat and kind of meetings that you need. And then really you'll be wrapping up with personal calling. And I think, like you said, some more of those, let's call them enterprisey features, right? So call queues and parking and your hybrid call connector back to on-prem systems, things like that, all coming in much later towards the end of the year. But it's an aggressive timeline for sure. It'll be interesting to see if they can hit it and push it through as it's laid out right there today. And based on some of these timelines, it's really one of those, if you're an organization and you haven't deployed Teams yet, you might want to think about getting on that train because it's barreling down the track at you.
Yes. Yeah. My clients are all of a sudden they are taking a much harder look at Teams and trying to get in position to roll it out probably a little bit quicker than some of them would have prior to some of these announcements.
Yeah. It's just, whoo, here it comes, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's the big Skype news. Again, a lot of that Skype for Business team stuff was covered at Ignite. This was just kind of a follow-up item to getting that roadmap out here. The other thing, we can link to it in the show notes, they added a whole bunch of team stuff into the Office 365 roadmap. I went and looked at it the day they announced it. You can kind of break that roadmap out if you haven't seen it before by what's in development, what's been released, what's planned. I think last time I looked, they had like 5 things released. And again, they've probably released more, but they put a few of the more recent things in there. They have 93 items in development right now of stuff they're working on in Teams. So we'll link to that. You can go look at all the stuff they're developing. A lot of it has to do with this roadmap, but Teams is definitely here to stay, and they're putting a lot of work and investing a lot into that Teams client.
I'm excited, right? It's really a good thing, right? When you kind of look at it, take a step back from the outside and say, how do we get more holistic integration across the platform? And this is a great way to do it. So it'll be super interesting to watch it ramp up over really the next 6 months, right? Because by the end of Q2, when you have some of that chat and meeting stuff, I think it becomes a little bit more viable, at least for kind of one segment or one vertical in there for chat and meetings, and worry about calling and all that other stuff later on in the year. And hopefully that gives everyone who does have to roll this out a little bit of an idea of where they should be looking at and areas they should be thinking about training and educating users and getting everybody over to, the other side of the fence.
Absolutely. So the next thing, you want to dive into some SharePoint and OneDrive news next?
Oh, I can't wait. Let's do it.
All right. So OneDrive Sync Client, the legacy one, they're making some changes to kind of how that's deployed, where it's bundled. So this one, not a ton here. The previous OneDrive Sync client, the Groove.exe. So Groove.exe, again, if you're not familiar with it, is the legacy one. OneDrive.exe is the new one. So up until now, Groove.exe was actually installed by default with the Office 2016 click to run installation. That is going to change now. So OneDrive.exe will finally be the new default sync client with your click-to-run installations. It looks like that's also going to be the new default with your MSI-based installations. So Groove is kind of slowly making its transition out. OneDrive is still the recommended one for Office 365 customers. This OneDrive client, the new one, OneDrive.exe, still doesn't support on-prem syncing. So if you want to sync with your on-prem environment, you're still going to have to stick with the old one, the Groove.exe. That will change. I believe it's with SharePoint 2019 that they announced at Ignite. On-prem will actually support OneDrive.exe too. So eventually you will be able to completely get away from Groove. But yeah, that default now is OneDrive.exe. So they're slowly making that transition to get away from Groove and fully over to that new sync client.
I think there's a couple interesting things here, right? So if you're an organization that has deployed OneDrive for Business and you've been running, like you said, click to run or MSIs, and you do have both Groove.exe and OneDrive.exe running side by side. So you've effectively been doing old sync client and next gen sync client. That was kind of our nomenclature for a long time. This process isn't going to uninstall anything, at least if you're using it, right? So as you come and you start to push Office updates and things like that through, maybe you do like C to R and you pull down your monthly update from the CDN. If the installer detects that you have anything at all bound into groove.exe for a sync connection, it's not going to do anything with it, right? It'll leave it alone and you'll kind of keep chugging along. What you're going to have to watch out for is if you're an organization that maybe you deploy Groove in OneDrive, but all your users don't use both, but you kind of put them both there and because, you have that on-prem environment and, maybe you're doing like hybrid, right? You got your SharePoint 2013, 2016, whatever running and SharePoint Online as well. So in that case, there is a registry key that can be deployed where you can push it out to your users and basically prevent the uninstall of Groove across the board, right? So that's a good thing. You can create a GPO or however you want to get that registry key out there to make sure you're in the state you want to be. And if you say, hey, I do want to follow along with Microsoft and I like this approach, I don't need to sync on-prem. I can sync all my workloads through the next-gen sync client through OneDrive.exe. And you want to replicate that behavior. I know most, if not all, enterprises are probably doing some kind of customization with ODT or like a config XML for click-to-runs, things like that. You're actually going to have to go in and specifically exclude things like Groove now to be able to replicate that default behavior of, if I just went to office.com and clicked install Office. So you should have kind of full life cycle and control. Nothing's going away unless you want it to go away. And, nothing's getting rolled over, uninstalled, things like that. You still have all the same GPO controls for both Groove and for the next-gen sync client for OneDrive.exe. So I think it's interesting. It'll be nice to finally see Groove and its limitations go away, but it's definitely the long tail, right? To wait till 2018 when they start to release SharePoint 2019 bits, probably towards the end of the year, whatever it is, to, how they typically get them out there a little bit early for betas and things like that. You're going to be in it for a while.
Yeah, definitely. So next SharePoint announcement. You want to take the next one?
I love this one. So this is the forms panel in modern lists and custom forms within Power Apps. So we've had the ability to bind SharePoint lists as a data source to Power Apps for a while now, but you had to kind of go and launch over into a Power App or into a web or a mobile view of that app. We talked a little bit about that in the past, right? But now effectively you're getting inline control. So a bunch of this stuff was demoed at Ignite as well. Now I'm going to be able to come in, have a custom form that is a Power App associated with my SharePoint list. So think like the old SharePoint designer days, right? Where I had like new form and display form and edit forms, things like that. And being able to come and transition those workloads or those forms really over into Power Apps and then have kind of native first-party experiences right within your web experience in SharePoint. So this should make things a lot quicker for, like I said, new forms. So adding new items, even like display forms, really all three of them, right? Display, edit, new, all those kinds of things. So this will be coming to first release it should have started in mid-October and rollout will be done by the end of December.
Yeah, I was just looking to see if I actually have this yet because I haven't noticed. I don't believe I do.
Well, they didn't say if it was first release for users or first release for for an org. How they flight things in those two different modes.
Yeah, you can go back and listen to our other podcast about that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't look like I have it yet. Who knows? I'll keep being patient. There's some other ones I'm waiting for too that should be in first release. But if you want to see it, again, there's some links out. You can see some screenshots of how it's supposed to work. So this is one of those announcements that came out on Tech Community. So there's kind of two different areas we watch. We watch blog posts. We watch the Tech Community site. I'm excited about that too. Up until now, there hasn't been a really good way to customize those forms, especially with the modern view. So hopefully I'll get this soon. I can start playing with it and it'll start rolling out to all the tenants here shortly.
Yeah, I mean, it continues that story, right, of being able to subsume some of that functionality that SharePoint Destroyer had and InfoPath and some of those things coming through. So you are talking like net new rebuilds, right? So it's not like you're going to have a conversion process for your custom display forms and things like that. But this does give you a path forward. So if you're doing newer implementations or kind of newer business process kind of things, you really don't have to stick with the legacy tooling if you don't want to.
So one other one, and then we'll take a quick break for word from our sponsors is they're making some updates to the Shared With Me view in OneDrive. So currently with Shared With Me in OneDrive, you didn't have a ton of options in terms of what you wanted, how to sort, filter, group on different metadata, or to see who shared the file and when they shared it with you. So they're bringing a lot of this functionality now to that Shared With Me view in OneDrive to help you sort, filter, group, find those different files that have been shared with you. So again, nothing you really need to do for this change. It'll start rolling out here. I don't see a date on this one when it's going to start rolling out. So it'll start rolling out hopefully soon, but it'll give you a lot more flexibility in that Shared With Me view within OneDrive, just to help you find those files that have been shared with you.
End of October.
End of October. Thanks.
Yeah. I mean, this is kind of a welcome one, right? I think the whole sharing experience in OneDrive is still a little confusing, especially if you're on the kind of the consumer, the receiving end of a shared thing. So, you could say, hey, go to your Shared With Me view. And then people say, well, I don't see things that were actually shared with me. Well, that's because it wasn't shared with you. It was just an anonymous link, that you received over time and somebody sent you. So it'll be nice to have some more options in there as a user and be able to move things around, because it has been a pretty frustrating experience to date.
Okay, I lied. We have one more SharePoint announcement that I'm going to quick sneak in here. Microsoft announced their Microsoft Content Services white paper. So this is a white paper from Microsoft about Microsoft Content Services. If you're wondering what the heck is Microsoft Content Services, I've never heard of that before. That was ECM. So apparently, as part of this white paper, Enterprise Content Management, or ECM, in SharePoint Online is now called MCS, or Microsoft Content Services. So there's a white paper out there. It kind of talks about, the title of the white paper is Modernizing Enterprise Content Management with Microsoft Content Services. Again, go out and read the white paper. We'll link to it. Kind of the biggest thing I got out of this was they changed the name from Enterprise Content Management to Microsoft Content Services.
Well, I mean, at least you're getting the right takeaways out of things. You can't ask for much more than that, right?
I do what I can.
I think this falls into kind of the usual, or, well, I think what you'll see out of like kind of the architecture, right? But it's good to help provide some context around what digital transformation means, especially within the context of SharePoint, right? So what services do I have the ability to consume, and how do those drive experiences on the other side, right? So if I think about something like a service availability, right? What does that mean for my users to go into Office 365 and think about the SLAs that are associated with that? Or when I think about content management and a service like intelligent search. So how does that surface as an experience? Where do my users consume it? And how do I need to manipulate my content to make it work within all that, right? So I think that frames and provides some context for that. There were also a couple good sessions at Ignite about kind of where they see ECM going, especially with, you've got this whole like groupify contextual thing. You've got hub sites coming. How should you be thinking about content organization, hierarchical versus flat structures, metadata within your documents, where you store things, how you guide users into the right place to store things, right? That whole when to use what scenario. So all very helpful, right? It's just somebody's got to go through and consume all this stuff.
Yep, absolutely. All right. So with that, let's take a quick break, hear a little word from BitWizards, and we'll be right back. We'd like to thank BitWizards for sponsoring the Microsoft Cloud IT Pro podcast. They've won Florida Trend Magazine's Best Companies to Work For 8 years running and have been a Microsoft Gold partner since 2001. Nobody loves Azure like BitWizards. BitWizards is looking for talented, like-minded IT pros with a knack for Azure. If you're listening to this podcast, you'd likely be a great fit at BitWizards. Just think, you could be listening to Scott and me on the beach. Go to bitwizards.com/cloudsmith right now to apply.
And just like that, we're back. So let's get out of SharePoint land and start talking a little bit about iOS and Android and some of the mobile experiences. So there's been a bunch of updates around the Exchange stack and things that are going on in messaging land. So there was an update to the iOS and Android app for Outlook. So if any organizations deploy that, you let your users use it, however that goes for you. There's now support for creating, deleting, and managing group membership straight from within Outlook on those mobile platforms. So this should be available for quite a few organizations. I know I've seen it in mine. I don't know if you've seen it in yours pop up yet. You don't need to do anything to prepare for it other than keep updating your app as you go along. And then this feature will magically show up over time. So I think it becomes increasingly important for organizations to think about educating your users on what groups are, right? Especially now that they have the ability to create them from the SharePoint homepage, from Outlook Online, from Outlook on the desktop, from a team, from a planner, and now from Outlook on a mobile device while they're running around and potentially not thinking about checking a gal or checking existing groups and kind of seeing what's out there.
Yeah, definitely. I just looked on mine because I haven't played with this yet, and I have it on mine as well. It is. It gets into this whole groups thing, and how do you manage these? How do you control them? Should you control them? That could probably be a whole podcast in and of itself. I know we talked about groups a while ago, one of our first episodes, but that was like 6 months ago, and a lot of stuff has changed. But it's nice to see these groups kind of becoming that central security membership type model in SharePoint, or not in SharePoint, but in Office 365. And again, just everything you can do with groups.
Outlook for iOS is also getting some other love. They're getting some search improvements. So you're going to see search moving to the bottom navigation bar and kind of becoming a first-party service within the mobile experience. So you're just going to have a search tab. You click over there. That'll automatically give you some automated results, right? So maybe your top contacts, if it's scanned and found any package deliveries, your recent files, all that good stuff, going to be available to you, ready to go as well. And here's a really fun one that I found to be interesting. So if an organization has deployed EOP, or Exchange Online Protection, they're going to start being RFC compliant for one really kind of critical thing. And that's for from addresses. So in the past, pre-November 9th, 2017, Exchange Online wasn't RFC compliant for a from address. So if something was potentially misformatted or really maybe using like other Unicode characters that it wasn't supposed to, things like that, to kind of try and like fish in, right? I think we've all seen the example of like go to apple.com, but it's not apple.com because it's Apple in like Cyrillic and, running those things through. So this is a good one. They're, like I said, just going to become RFC 5322 compliant. So if anyone has never read an RFC article, definitely, go ahead and start going down the rabbit hole and figuring that out. There's nothing you'll need to do to prepare for that one. It's just going to automatically happen, but you might need to put some transport rules or some other administrative controls in place to keep moving forward if you feel like that's something that's going to impact your organization.
Yeah, that is a nice one. It's nice, like I said, it's nice to see him finally get caught up with that one. One other one we skipped over, iOS. If you're still on iOS 9 and you're using Outlook, Microsoft is ending support for Outlook on iOS 9. So get upgraded to iOS 10.
iOS 11.
Are you on iOS 11?
Yeah.
Have you had any issues?
No.
Oh, you're doing good then. My neighbor and I were commenting about all of our issues with iOS 11.
Stop running the betas.
No, I upgraded to a beta to fix all of the issues I was having. I was having to reboot my phone like 3 or 4 times a day because I'd go into text messages and none of my text messages would show up. Apps would crash. Like my phone, I would try to shut it down and it wouldn't shut down. It'd sit there with a little spinny wheel trying to shut itself down. And I did some searching, and apparently you're a lucky one because a lot of people have had some issues with iOS 11. So I actually upgraded to a beta version of it, and I think it was 11.2 beta, and it has actually been much more stable for me on the beta than it was on the prior release.
Yeah, whatever came out this week worked pretty good. So my experience has been that the iOS itself, like, yeah, it's got its quirks and whatever, but it's kind of a known quantity. It tends to be applications. So not all developers are really great at publishing or publicizing how much their applications suck. So for instance, I use a podcast app called Overcast, right? So Overcast manages all of its data inside of SQLite databases. And the way that the developer pulls those databases causes Springboard crashes. So Springboard is your launcher in iOS, right? You go to the home screen and you see your dock and all your apps. You're looking at Springboard. So I have this bug that I live with because it's built into Overcast. Literally, it's the way the application performs. It's got this nasty bug where it causes at least a once a day Springboard crash. And it tends to be at the most inconvenient time. Like I just stopped listening to a podcast to pick up a phone call, but Overcast is still running in the background, still doing its thing, and it pulls the database and oops, phone call goes away because there is effectively your Finder. Just go ahead restarting. So it turns out there's a lot of applications that are like that. So iOS 11 has its quirks and all the other stuff. But if you think about all the apps that we tend to run, right, being a little more savvy, like I think, the stats are like the average person only installs like less than 10 apps, right? I've got hundreds installed on my phone. And they're all doing weird, janky, different things.
Yep. So anyways, we digress into iOS 11. I don't know how we got into iOS debates on a Office 365 podcast.
It was your fault.
It was my fault. It was my complaining about iOS 11. But upgrade to at least iOS 10 if you're using Outlook. You can go to iOS 11 if you want to. Scott and I are both using it. And we're going to try to squeeze in one more quick one here. I know this is one of your favorites, Scott, is public folders and Exchange.
All right, quick rant, okay? So there is a offering or a capability in Office 365 groups. So we're talking Outlook groups, right? Modern groups associated with Outlook, where you can migrate a public folder, both your online and on-premises public folders, into an Office 365 group. So Microsoft has some guidance on this. They have some articles about it. I don't know how many organizations this would apply to. Like most of the ones I've ever worked in that have public folders tend to have extremely hierarchical structures, right? Like humans are hierarchical thinkers. And Outlook groups do not support hierarchical structures, right? They're flat for conversations. They don't have subfolders, all those kinds of things. But if you want to go down this path, you do have the ability, like I said, to migrate a public folder. Could be a single public folder, so you don't have to do like a whole public folder cutover. Again, it can be online or on-prem, so you don't have to shove everything to one side of the fence or the other to make this work. Supports regular public folders and mail-enabled public folders, so you can kind of have your cake and eat it too if you want. Even does like calendar folders or document folders, things like that, to go ahead and bring everything over. So if you're looking to cut down on your consumption of storage or compute within your Exchange environments, and you've got like more than a couple public folders, maybe this is an offering that suits you. Maybe, with lots of like stars and exclamations and notes and other things.
All right. Sounds good. Well, that takes us up to our time, maybe even a little over. So we will wrap it up and maybe we'll even come back with some news in another episode. There was a bunch of stuff we would like to get to. Maybe we'll even switch up our format and try to cover just a few news articles each week, just so we can keep you guys updated on what's going on. But for now, we'll wrap it up and we'll talk to you again next week.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben.
Yep. Thanks, Scott. If you enjoyed the podcast, go leave us a 5-star rating in iTunes. It helps to get the word out so more IT pros can learn about Office 365 and Azure. If you have any questions you want us to address on the show or feedback about the show, feel free to reach out via our website, Twitter, or Facebook. Thanks again for listening and have a great day.